Hey guys, welcome back to Cheddar. Joining us now is Stephanie Kelton. She's an economics professor at the University of Missouri, Kansas. As we mentioned, the central bank raised interest rates as expected and remains on track for 2 more increases this year. So Stephanie, do you think the current economic climate justifies this move?
Well, I guess I'd probably put myself on the side of Neel Kashkari, who dissented from the opinion today. No, in my view, the conditions really don't warrant the rate hike at this point. I mean, it is true that you can cherry pick data, and there are signs that the labor market is tight, depending upon what you look at. But I find myself largely in agreement with the Minneapolis Fed chair, who declined to vote for the rate hike today, mostly because I agree with him that there is still a lot of unemployment out there. When you look at part-time for economic reasons, that's people who really want full-time work and can't find it, but they're working a few hours. They've got part-time work. People who've dropped out of the labor force, the discouraged workers, that broader measure of unemployment, U6, that Kashkari is concerned about, I also am very sensitive to. And also the Fed still hasn't hit its 2% inflation target. So the move seems preemptive to me.
Janet Yellen optimistic, though, that the Fed is moving toward higher inflation, toward that 2% target. Stephanie, talk to us about that U6 rate. Here's where it gets sort of complicated. The headline number for the jobs report has been strong, strong, strong. I mean, no one expected more than 200,000 jobs to be added on a monthly basis this year. People were expecting jobs to the tune of more of about 100,000 or so, and that was even last year. So the gains, the headline number is a bit deceiving. For our viewers that aren't familiar with the U6 rate, what are you seeing there, and why is that such an eyesore for you?
Well, if you compare the official unemployment rate, what economists look at is the U3 rate, that headline number, to the broader measure, the U6 measure, you'll see that the U6 measure is roughly twice what the official unemployment rate is. So, much more significant in terms of, something closer to 9.5%. I think that, I forget what the first part of your question was.
How deceiving is that headline number? Talk to us more, get into more of the weeds here, and talk about how many people actually are unemployed and some numbers behind it, so that people watching who aren't super familiar with this, the main number that everyone always reports is the headline number. And look, the markets move on the headline number, but we know that there is a lot more underneath the hood. So talk to us about the numbers, the frightening numbers that you're seeing underneath the hood. What are they?
Yeah, so you mentioned strong economic growth for the start of the year, but of course what we have really are the February job numbers, which did come in very much higher than what was anticipated. But if you go back and look at February of last year and the February before that year, February numbers tend to be very strong. January's numbers were weaker, and on the whole, if you look at the average over the course of the last 4 or 5 months, we're still below 200,000 jobs on average per month for the last 5 months, say. So it's not, by any stretch of the imagination, really robust, consistent economic growth in terms of the job market. Under the hood, when you look at the jobs, the kind of jobs that have been created in the recovery, about 60% of all of the jobs that have been created since the economy began to recover are low-wage and low-hour jobs. So it is true that we've replaced jobs. We've clawed back the 8.7 million jobs that were lost in the aftermath of the financial crisis, but a significant number of those jobs have been replaced with jobs that don't provide the hours or the salary that the jobs that were lost once provided. And so there is weakness in the part of the consumer because the type of jobs and the wages that those jobs pay simply aren't there.
Janet Yellen said in her press conference just a little while ago that stock prices do factor into financial conditions, and the high level of the stock market could help boost consumer spending. So I guess my question is the Fed worried at all about how much the stock market has risen and how well the Dow has been doing for the last couple months?
That's a great question. I don't know that I would use the word, are they worried? But I do know that Janet Yellen has talked in the past about concerns that she has for what she called the unintended consequences of quantitative easing and the Fed's unconventional policy tools and so forth. And so she's sensitive to the idea that in this, low interest rate environment where the Fed was doing QE, 85 billion a month, month after month, and so forth, that part of what that was designed to do was to encourage investors to, quote, reach for yield. And that you start to push asset prices up. Did we lose you? Did I lose you? Oh, dear.
Stephanie, are you still there? Do we still have you,
am I
Stephanie?
there?
Yes, okay. It looks like we still have you. Keep going.
I can hear you.
Perfect. We got you. Keep going.
Okay. So I was just saying that, in part, what the Fed was doing was, in fact, designed to create a wealth effect. That is what part of what the Fed was trying to accomplish was to boost asset prices, to encourage investors to take risks, to move into riskier asset classes, push up asset prices, and generate some additional spending and economic activity through this so-called wealth effect. And to the extent that was accomplished, I think the Fed is aware that that's a side effect of its own policies. And now it's possible that what it sees is an overvalued stock market and that there are concerns. I don't really believe that's why the Fed hiked rates today. I think the Fed is sensitive to what's happening with asset prices, but I don't think that was the motivator behind the rate hike.
Stephanie, the connection's dropping in and out of it, so I'm going to ask you one last question, and hopefully we can keep you on for this, which is, do you think at all this move to raise rates was a political one? Of course, we know Janet Yellen only raised rates once under the Obama administration, and so people wondering now with Trump in the office, inflation expected to rise, do you think that there was any politics behind this move?
I really don't. I mean, you had a 9-to-1 vote. This is not a partisan or political move by any stretch. I think the Fed has wanted to, in their words, normalize rates for a very long time. They've just been waiting for conditions to sort of match up with their own desire to get rates significantly off of zero. Because quite frankly, if you go back and listen to what Janet Yellen was saying at the summer Jackson Hole conference, there is concern at the Fed about what the Fed is going to be able to do in the event that the U.S. economy goes into recession before the Fed has moved rates significantly away from zero. And if they don't get rates up enough before the next recession comes, then they lack the policy space to cut rates to deal with the next downturn. And so I think for a variety of reasons, the Fed has been quite eager to get rates up. And it didn't matter whether it was Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. The simple fact of the matter is the numbers are fitting the narrative for the Fed and justified this move.
All right, Stephanie, we want to thank you so much. Stephanie Kelton, economics professor over at the University of Missouri, Kansas. We want to thank you so much for your context on what happened with the Fed today.
Sure. Thank you for having me.